special session about how can private equity support the internationalization of small and medium-sized companies, which is a very, very interesting topic. And we're very happy to welcome Professor Moshfique Uddin, who will be talking about all the study that they've been doing on this subject and showing a lot of data. And we'll try to leave some space after your presentation so that we can actually ask questions and maybe get you answers, I suppose. and it will be very interesting to discuss about this subject, which is more and more more and more important in France at the moment, where all the private equity sector is growing a lot, and the internationalization of companies is also more and more important. So the floor is yours now, and we're very happy to welcome you tonight in Paris for this show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be here in front of you all. There is a particular reason to be very pleased. The reason is after I get this invitation, I was promoted to the position of professor, because before I was an associate. So once I got the invitation throughout this process, thank you very much. So I'm now a full professor at Leeds University Business School. So maybe you have brought some luck for me, which is good for me. Anyway, so the topic today is we'll be discussing how the private equity investment can support the internationalization of SMEs. So the international is a very broad sort of area. This paper basically focuses on the exporting activities. So we will try to see if the SMEs get any benefit in terms of doing their exporting activities when their activities or their operations are financed by the private equity. So that is something we will try to see in this paper and in this discussion. So before we start, it's a little bit of introduction. You can see there is a guy in the slide. So as smart as Emmanuel Macron. Anyway, not as much as him, but so I'm a professor of financial management, and I'm also the divisional director for internationalization within the Leeds University Business School. I'm also working in various other UK universities in different various capacities. And an important one is I am the senior editor of finance for International Journal of Emerging Markets. So my research is mostly related to multi-country data and focusing on emerging markets. So I'm really enjoying my work as a senior editor of this journal. I'm also in the editorial board for some other journals, and I'm basically interested in challenge-led research. As you can see, I have already done some research on Brexit. I've done some research on COVID, and all these research have been published in very good journals. So anything challenging obviously attracts me. And now currently I'm doing a research on US-China trade war, and hopefully we'll start a research on the sanctions, which is another burning issue on this. So these sort of challenging things really attracts me. Okay. So obviously this private equity also is a challenging task, because so far we have seen the research in the private equity is spread along the finance areas. But in my research, it's combining the private equity with the internationalization. So it's a multidisciplinary research, which is obviously challenging. So that's why I got attracted. So the whole presentation is based on the paper, which was basically co-authored with me by Nick Wilson, who is a professor at Leeds University Business School as well. He's a senior professor and the director of the Credit Management Research Center within our Leeds Business School. And we were fortunate I was fortunate to work along with Mike Wright, who is a very prominent researcher in the area of venture capital and private equity. Basically, he is one of the pioneering figures within UK who started research in this area. But sadly, he passed away in November 2019. But we worked together up to a stage, and then after that, we had to carry out without him. Right. So this is the agenda. So I'll start with some global trend of the export and the private equity. and then I will try to summarize the objectives of this study, and then I will talk about the determinants of the export. Okay, so what are the usual determinants of export and how the private equity can support them? We need these stories because otherwise we cannot establish the fact that yes, these are the hypotheses that we are going to test. So once we have got these stories or the theories to support, then we can test the data. So that's why we have to explain these, how the determinants, what are the determinants and how the private equity can support them. We'll also talk about the board characteristics. What are the board characteristics that probably will have an impact on the internationalization, and also how the private equity can help the SMEs to achieve those board characteristics that are helpful for the internationalization. Then we talk a little bit about the data and the method, and then we'll present the preliminary results, which is coming from the descriptive stats, and we'll also talk about some key results, and then I will conclude at the end. Right, so let's start. So of course, the export is an important issue within the global trade. As you can see from this data, in 2020, export, in fact, because of the COVID, it dropped significantly. The growth rate falls in North America. It was more than 8%. In Europe, it was more than 7%. There was a negative growth of export. But we came back, and in 2021, after the COVID, it has increased, and of course we have got significantly positive growth in North America and Europe, and we are projecting the growth rate, a modest growth rate, in 2020 and 2023. So the growth export activities are growing over the time. So that's something which is important. We can also see the activities of the private equity across the globe. As you can see from this graph, the deal values of the private equity across the globe was about $800 billion, and it has increased in 2021 to $1.2 trillion. So it's a huge amount of sector or industry, and it's expanding with such a faster rate. And if you can look at the number of deals, it started with, in 2019 it was about 15,000. By the end of 2021, it was 25,000. So the activities of the private equity is significantly increasing. Now, before we combine these export and the private equity, let's just a little bit about what it is. Now, the private equity, of course, it's a group of very experienced people, managers, top-level managers. They come together and they form a company to manage the other companies. So they usually buy the other companies and they manage it, and they create value, they add value, and after some time they sell it to the other people, and this is the way they make the profit out of that. How they get that funding from? These are the sources of funding. So it can be the public pension funds, the corporate pension funds, insurance companies. So all these long-term institutional investors, they provide funding to those super expert managers who are called the general partners, who manage those funds. And once they get those fundings from those institutional investors, they invest those funds to buy out the problem-driven companies or the companies which are undervalued. They manage them and they create values to them. So this is basically a sort of very brief mechanism of the private equity. Now, once we understand what the private equity is, and once we know there is a huge expansion of the private equity sector, private equity investments. Now, these huge expansion of the private equity attracted the attention of both the academics and the practitioners, and people have started doing research on it. And there has been a lot of research going on, but most of them are basically focused on the profitability, productivity, employment changes, survival, these sort of issues. So people who are doing research on the private equity basically focusing on these profitability and productivity issues. Now, there are specific evidences that yes, the use of private equity increases the productivity of the firm or the bought out companies. The use of private equity improves the profitability of the firm. And there was a study which was done by Wilson, who is also one of the co-author of this paper. He also found that the use of private equity basically helped the firm to go through smoothly throughout the the recession, which is the financial crisis during that period. So even firms which are using the private equity, they are better able to cope any sort of financial crisis, okay, or any recession. So these are some of the results of the studies which have been done on the private equity. But one interesting thing is that there hasn't been any paper or any research that has focused on how the private equity help the firm to internationalize their businesses across the border. Okay, and there is the gap, and we try to fill the gap with our research. Now we have got two main research questions in this paper. One is we try to look at firstly how the private equity or the use of private equity help the SMEs or the portfolio companies to increase the possibility of the export, which is whether they will export or not after the use of private equity, which is the export propensity. We'll also examine the export intensity, which is whether the use of private equity helps the already exporting firm to increase the volume of export or the rate of export after the use of the private equity or the investment. So this is the first research question that we will be looking at. The second thing is, which is the most important part, is we will try to see how the expertise of the board of directors, which is basically coming from the general partners of the private equity firm, how their expertise will help the firm to increase the propensity and intensity of the portfolio company. So this is the second research question that we'll try to address. Is that okay? So am I going too fast, or is it okay?
Fine. I think it's okay unless somebody says otherwise, but it should be okay.
Thank you.
Go on, please, Professor.
Right. Now, given these two research questions, let's talk about the propensity and the intensity first. So let's talk about the determinants. So what are the determinants of the export? Now, the determinants of the export can be explained in many different ways. So by using many different theories. One of the very important theory is the learning by exporting theory, or learning by exporting proposition, which says that people or the firms, the export gradually increase as they go through over the time. So the more they export, the more they learn, and that learning eventually help to expand their exporting activities. Okay. Now the learning basically comes from the access to the new knowledge. When they're going to the new market, they can access to the new knowledge, they can access to the new technologies. They will have greater contact with the foreign customers, suppliers, and all these benefits they get when they start exporting. These sort of benefits they start to get, and they learn from these sort of access. Now, what we are trying to say, that because of the wider network of the private equity firms, because of their expertise, they should be able to help the portfolio companies to learn it better. Okay, and because they help the portfolio companies to learn it better, that's why when the firm will get the private equity investment, they obviously will export more, which is the propensity will be higher. Okay. Now the next thing is, another determinant is, of course, it comes from the access to finance, okay, and the cost of entering into the foreign market. Now we are saying that use of the private equity will also solve this problem. So the quick access to the firm, because when you use the private equity, you do not have to be liable to the shareholders as a whole. You do not have to go to the annual general meetings every time and address the questions of the different types of shareholders. So you don't have all those problems. and you do have the cost of doing the business, and these costs can be reduced or can be taken care of by the expertise and the investment of the private equity investors. And therefore, of course, the private equity investment will help the firm to increase the intensity of the export, and also it helps to increase the propensity of the export. Sorry. Now, the another part is the private equity. What is the reason? Of course, there are different reasons that the private equity can play to improve the intensity and the propensity. But in our paper, what we are saying is the core benefit of using the private equity is the expertise they bring to the board of the company. Okay. Now, how does it work? Of course, we know that the SMEs, when they go for the export, the one of the major problems they face is the limited knowledge and the limited network of export. Okay, so limited knowledge and limited network, and also the liability of foreignness. So when they go into the foreign market, the unknown market, the unknown government, unknown customers, all these things basically pose a greater level of risk to the exporter or to the SMEs as an exporter. To overcome all these problems, the farms need some sort of resources. Okay, so and of course, these distinctive resources can help the SMEs to make their position distinctive as opposed to their competitors. And once they become distinctive with the use of all these, resources, then of course it will help them to cater better in the foreign market. Now, based on the review of the resource-based view, the APEC and Blanco Igloo, they have identified different sort of resources that can help the SMEs to achieve their distinctive positions. And in fact, when they talk about different sort of resources, they mostly talk about the managerial resources. Say, for example, the manager's international outlook, the manager's attitude, manager's characteristics, manager's managerial know-how, their ability to create a network, and the quality of the human resources, their skills, and all these different sort of resources that the managers have. And they have identified that these are the core skills that the SMEs basically lacks. And these resources help the SMEs to overcome all the barriers they have got to do the exporting in the foreign markets. Now, the corporate board can help to achieve all these resources. And of course, when we talk about the corporate board, it's not easy to form a corporate board with a varieties of expertise, because when we form a corporate board in a typical sort of corporate setting, you have to get the permission or the vetting from the shareholders. And within the hundreds and thousands of shareholders, sometimes it becomes very difficult to get a unanimous sort of decisions to create that board with right sort of skills. However, if we use the private equity, we do have some advantage of that, because the private equity do not have, they are not accountable to the shareholders, because they bring the fund and they delist the companies from the stock exchange, and they manage the whole company. So they are not accountable to the shareholders. So they can make their own decisions. So they can bring in anybody they want with the right set of skills. And because they have got a substantial investment in the portfolio companies, they can exert the pressure to bring in the right people they think will be befitting to manage the whole firm. So because of these advantages, the private equity backed firms will have the most competent board, which will be able to run the businesses with right set of skills, right set of resources, which will help the firm to internationalize or to promote the export of the firms. Now, These are the sort of arguments based on which we have developed those two research questions. Now this is the time to test them. Now, how we are going to test them? So we have used a very comprehensive set of data, UK-based data, where we have got about 2.6 million company level observations altogether. So we have basically selected all the firms for which we have got the company accounts, okay, and which covers a period of 1998 to 2013. That's the initial set of samples that we have got. Then we have separated out the firms which export out of those 2.6 million company levels observations. We have separated out the observations which are related to export. And we have found out about 10% of those 2.6 million, they are related to export. Then we have tried to separate out of those 2.6 million company level observations, the firms which are financed by the private equity. And we have got about 21,134 company level observations. And out of those, 23% are engaged in exports. So we have analyzed these data. Now we need this different type of data because we have got the firms which are exporting and financed by private equity, and we need to have a control group with firms with private equity financing but not exporting, firms with exporting but not private equity financed. And that's why we have to use all these set of data to develop different control groups to run the tests. Now, this is the sort of exactly the thing that I have just said, that this is the distribution of the data. We can say that this is the total samples, and these are the exporters out of the total sample. These are the percent of exporting, and these are the people or the companies which are backed by the private equities, and these are the private equity backed exporters, and this is the percentage of that. Now, this is an equation. I'm not going through that, but I'm just saying that we have used the Logit model to see the propensity, and we have used the Tobit model to see the intensity. Now, the propensity is exporter or not exporter, so the binary variable. That's why you need to use the Logit model. But in case of the growth intensity, the growth can be from 0% to 100%, and that's why we need to use. It's not a binary thing. That's why we had to use the Tobit model. But both of them are probabilistic model. Okay, right. Now, what are the results? So we, using the data, we have developed some descriptive statistics, and we have used some t-stats to find out the statistical significance of those results, descriptive results. And we have got some interesting sort of findings, as you can see, that we have found out that some farm level factors, which is the larger farms, listed companies, and the foreign owned companies, they are more likely to be exporters. Forget about the private equity financing. Just simply, without considering the private equity investment, if a farm is a large farm, if a farm is a listed company, or if a farm has got any foreign ownership, they are more likely to export. If a farm is from a knowledge intensive industry, or if a farm itself is a knowledge intensive farm where the R&D investment is very high, and if the farm has got a very high level of intangible assets, they are more likely to be an exporter. And then in terms of the industry, farms from technology industry or from the manufacturing industry, they are more likely to exports. Okay. Now, these are some of the farm level characteristics and the industry level characteristics of other determinants. In terms of the board, we have found out that the foreign nationals as the directors and the directors with experiences, they have, if a farm has got more foreign nationals as directors, or if they have got directors with more experience, they tend to export more. And also the network. So if a director with multiple directorships, farms which has got directors with multiple directorships, they tend to export more. So these are some of the findings that we have got using our descriptive statistics. And of course, these results are statistically significant because we have done the t-test to find that significance. Again, another important findings is private equity backed firms are exporting more, and it's about 10% of their sales are coming from exporting. So all the private equity backed firms, out of the total sales, 10% are coming from exporting. Now we are comparing that with a non-PE backed firm where their average, about 4% of their average sales are coming from exporting. So again, the descriptive statistic is saying that PE backed firms are more successful in terms of exporting compared to the non-PE backed firm. So these are the descriptive results. Now, when we run those Logit and Tobit models, we got some interesting results. I'm not showing those results or the numbers or tables in here, but I'm just going through some of the key findings of my paper. One of the interesting finding is, across all the models, we have found out that the P investment, of course, positively influenced the propensity and the intensity of the export of the firms. So the dummy variables that we have created for the PE backed firms, these are all positive and significant. So it clearly shows that the PE backed firms are more likely to be exporter, and the PE backed firms are, the growth of the export for the PE backed firms are more than the non-PE backed firms. So this is the general, widely found out result across all the models. Then and of course, all the farm level and the industry level variables, we have got the positive and an expected sign, statistically significant sign, like the larger farms, the listed farms, the knowledge intensive farms, all of them are found to be significantly effective, positively affecting the export propensity and intensity. We also have included some board characteristics in both our models, and we have found out that the percentage of the foreign nationals on the board is positive and significant, along with the average experience of the board of directors. So we are saying that if any of the SMEs or any of the companies within their board, if they have got more foreign nationals, then they will be more successful in terms of exporting activities. And also, if they have got more experienced board members or board directors, then they will be more successful in exporting. And of course, we are saying that the private equity firms, they are more capable of bringing in foreign nationals in the boards of their portfolio companies. They're more capable of bringing in more experienced people within the board of their portfolio companies. An increase in the percentage of the foreign directors increases the export propensity and intensity as well. The very sorry. Sorry about that. The variable measuring the director's tenure, of course, the more the time the directors are spending within the firm, the more familiar they become within the advantages, the limitations, the strength of all of the firm. So they should be better guide the firm towards exporting activities, and that's what we also have found. The tenure variations, and the average number of the multiple directorships. These characteristics also have got a positive impact on the exporting activities. Now, as opposed to that, what we have found out that the female directors and the participation of the female directors within the board and the inclusion of the ethnic minorities, they are not. We haven't got the negative relationship, but the relationship is not statistically significant, which means that the participation of the female directors within the board and the ethnic minority is not as helpful to promote the export as we have got in other studies, So that's another thing that we have got in our paper. Now, for the results that we have got some empirical evidences which support the results that we have got. Like, say, for example, Rueber and Fisher state that the international knowledge and the experience are important export propensity, which is similar to our findings. But the gender diversity is less likely to bring related foreign market experience to the farm. So it's all about how people know about the foreign market. Now, it certainly doesn't mean that diversity will ensure that greater knowledge in the foreign markets, and that's why we have got the more inclusion of the female directors may not be as helpful as we should expect. Again, the minority is not helpful because there was a study by Guest who found out that the majority board of directors sometimes they exert pressure on the minority people not to express their views very strongly, and that's why the minority or the people from ethnic minorities who will probably be the minority within the board itself probably will not be very helpful because of the pressures from the other side of the board, which is majority of the non-ethnic minority people. And there is an evidence which was provided by Guest, and which our finding is similar to that finding as well. Now, these are the results that we have found out, where we have used the P sample and we have used the control sort of samples, and we have compared these two groups of samples. Now, we have run another regression where we only have looked at the farms which was supported by the P investments. So all the samples are basically the portfolio companies of the private equity firms. What we have done is, in this analysis, that we have seen the same set of board characteristics data and their impact on the export propensity and intensity before the P investment and after the P investment. Okay, so we run another set of regressions on that, and the result shows that before the P investment, these are the coefficients that we have got. So, and all of them are negative in terms of the directors or the board characteristics. And of course, because the coefficients are negative before the private equity investment, that clearly shows that basically the board characteristics are helpful to promote the propensity and intensity of SME exports, and that is only evident after the P investment, not before the P investment. So these results further support our research hypothesis, where we are saying that the P investment basically exert extensive sort of positive impact on the portfolio companies' exporting activities. Now, there are some conclusions, and I'm not going through those conclusions again because these are the similar things. What I want to say, the results of this paper has got a significant policy implications. So any SME who are in need of money or financing to support their foreign activities, rather than thinking of traditional sources of financing, they can think of private equity, because as we were talking about, I was talking with Arnaud before we start the sessions. It's something like buy one get one free type of thing, that you get the financing which you will get similar to those from the traditional sources of financing, but in addition to have the financing itself, you get the greater expertise of the PE general practitioners, who are basically are expert managers, and they will sit in your board and they will help you to run your businesses. And that is the added advantage of using the private equity. And of course, it will support not only the exporting, but also the other avenues of SME businesses. And that's why these research findings will be definitely be of interest, I believe, or we believe, definitely of interest to the SME managers, so that they can think of using more private equity financing to expand their businesses in the foreign countries. Now, that's all that I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.